hello everyone. Just get my little props organised. Excellent. One thing I've learnt about when you're speaking at conferences is never to rush setting yourself up, because it can sort of derail you from the very beginning. So hello, my name is Natasa, and I just want to thank PIEFA for inviting me to speak at the Growing Next Gen Food and Fibre Conference today. When I think fibre, I think wooden pulp and paper type products. So it's a little bit different to, I think, what people maybe think about fibre when they think about food and fibre. It's just not the cotton, it's not just the traditional sort of clothing type material. It is actually also the trees and the wooden fibre products that actually our industry does produce. So I'm really honoured to be able to have the opportunity to talk to educators today. I too have children and a lot of respect for teachers. It's not an easy job, and hopefully today, what I'll be sharing with you today might be able to inspire and engage students who may not think of themselves traditionally connected to the forest industry or the forest sector. I too also want to acknowledge the traditional lands upon which we gather here today, the Ngunnawal country, and I'm from Canberra, so I get to live in this lovely city all the time. And I also just want to recognise their elders past, present and emerging. So as I said, I work at the Australian Forest Products Association, and we are essentially the national peak body for the forest sector. We advocate and work for policies that will actually ensure the longevity of this industry and ensure that people really understand how critical this sector is to our everyday lives. Our members include the forest growers, the harvesters, the manufacturers and the pulp, paper and bioproduct sector. So you might think, who do we actually advocate to or for? So we predominantly, talk to politicians up on the Hill, and I have spent 20 years up at Parliament House, so I know this system and processes very, very well. And also to government departments, the public service, and to government regulators like the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Oh, I probably needed to, where are we up to? So in addition to, the general sort of advocacy work that we do, we also provide an education, to essentially ensure that issues that are relevant to the sustainable growth of the sector are well understood, because there is a lot of misunderstanding, misinformation about the industry, and the industry is often not seen as a holistic industry, which is really critical to the longevity of the sector. When we think about production and delivery of food to the end consumer, it's actually sustainable forestry and our renewable, innovative timber and fibre products that are really getting the food from the farm to the end consumer. And this ties the importance of food security in with what we like to coin now fibre security as well. So, we often say that you can't have food security without timber and fibre security. And essentially, this is where my props come into play. I think everyone now goes out to the supermarket, the cafe and what have you, and you're getting these lovely timber-based type products, from your wooden spoons to your lovely straws, and of course everyone now is using a lovely paper bag. And it's really critical that we understand how important these products are, in addition to the timber that we have in our houses and what have you. So it is actually the innovation that actually has allowed this type of cutlery and straws and what have you to be accepted by the end consumer, because the end consumer, while they actually do want to displace the plastics that currently exist in our economies, they are actually also wanting that integrity in the product. And I should also say, I guess the other really critical aspect for our food and fibre supply chains are our pallets, which I don't think anyone thinks about in a lot of detail, but without them you actually just can't get food from a lot of our warehouses out to the supermarkets where the food needs to get. And I think we can also all remember the issues around when COVID was happening, and the fear, I guess, of not being able to get your toilet paper. It was really quite critical that people actually got that product, and that product is a fibre product and actually is made here in Australia, so you're all safe. It was mainly just a supply issue and rather than a lack of supply of the product. So when we think about the when we think about the industry as a whole, this is essentially forestry at a glance. We have 134 million hectares of forest land in Australia, and around 132 hectares is what we traditionally call native forest, and 2 million hectares is what we call plantation forestry. The forest sector essentially sustainably manages native forest in accordance with what we call regional forestry agreements, and they're agreements between the federal and state governments. And only 0.06% of native forest is managed, which technically means it's harvested and regrown, and that equates to about 73,000 hectares only. So it's a small amount of forestry, and I know that some of you in the room might be engaged in the aspect of forestry where, it's really challenging and people are there's a lot of misinformation around the management of native forestry in this country. I'll leave it at that. So all forests store carbon in the trees as the trees grow. However, trees do reach what we call a sequestration threshold. And that means that as they age and the carbon sequestration slows down, it eventually reaches essentially capacity. However, sustainable management of Australian forests means that as trees are harvested to make products that we all love, they actually are repeated and the carbon cycle starts again. So over half of Australian forests are also under Indigenous ownership management and or have special access rights. And the forest sector not only harvests trees for Australia's timber and fibre needs, but it also considers the biodiversity impacts and actually seeks to monitor and protect the health of the forests, because technically without these forests and maintaining the health of these forests, the sector itself would not survive. So when that previous slide had a lot of information on it, so just to really highlight some key aspects of the economic value of the industry, it is a $24 billion industry. However, we do have a $2 billion trade deficit, so essentially we do not have the capacity to sustain and to make our own fibre needs for what we need in this country. We do import a lot of timber into the country, and we can't actually guarantee that timber that is coming from other jurisdictions are facing the same sort of high level of scrutiny that we have here in Australia. So that is something to keep in mind and why we should really grow the industry here. Each year the industry does plant 70 million trees, are replanted each year as well. So this photo to me represents the key concept of what the PIEFA conference is actually talking about today, and it is that next gen. And for our industry, it's quite exciting because for young children today, for the trees that are planted today are actually for the generation of the future. It takes a long time to grow a tree, so you're looking 25 to 30, 35. And in the hardwood sector or the native sector, you're looking for trees that are going to be grown somewhere between 40 to 70 years. It's a long-term crop, technically speaking. So it takes a lot of foresight management in this sector. So where am I up to? And of course that, whilst there is the sustainable forestry sector, there is actually also a lot of jobs associated with the sector, which may not be something that people think about front of mind when we're thinking about the forest sector. So yeah, there are a lot of jobs beyond the foresters, and I don't say that to undermine the professional foresters, because a lot of their work is actually based on a deep understanding of the complex ecosystems of forests. So the science of forests is known as silviculture, and silviculture is applied in management of forests to sustain or enhance ecological outcomes, continually improving productivity, vitality and diversity of forest ecosystems. This includes forest management, and this is applied across all types of forests, whether it's native or plantation forest or farm forestry as well, which I haven't talked about a lot today, but it is a small aspect, and we want to really grow that ability for the forest sector and for farmers actually to work together to increase our forests that we can actually utilise to make our products. So I guess the key takeaway message that I just really want to put on the table early on is that sustainable forestry is more than just planting the trees and hoping for the best. It's actually a science, and our foresters do a fabulous job in actually ensuring the longevity of our forests. So when we think about, again, the careers and opportunities for students of today and the future, there are many different types of jobs that actually kids can get involved in, which they would be better off in those careers if they had a better understanding of sustainable forestry. And actually last week, and I haven't got a photo of it, but I wish I did, but happy to talk to you one later, is last week I actually met an architect who is a project leader on a beautiful mass timber building, high-rise building in Melbourne. Her name was Maria, and she started architecture as her undergrad, and is now leading a team on the construction build. And to ensure that she understands the products, Maria actually has visited AFPA members who are the manufacturing companies of the timber that is being used in this building. And so our members, they're members called Axlim Australia and Australian Sustainable Hardwoods. Now, again, I guess the joy of being able to talk to you today is we'd love to, engage further with students and teachers. So at any time, if there is information that you require around the forest industry, certainly more than happy to connect directly with you, in addition to obviously Beth over there from Forest Learnings, who provide online resources for teachers and students. So the other thing that I just also wanted to say is that with that, so the Clean Energy Finance Corporation is an organisation that actually is looking to, increase actions that will decarbonise economies and reduce our current greenhouse emissions. So this is why they've developed a 300 million timber building program. And I guess that in itself speaks for the benefits, again, of the industry, particularly as we look to transition to a decarbonised economy and to reduce our emissions in order to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. So I've also listed work, around policy work and the Minister for Forestry, and it was really interesting hearing Renee talk about the fact that when the Minister for Agriculture spoke to her, it sparked an interest in her. And I think there's so many different jobs I think that kids could undertake that come out of the forest sector, but are not directly, planting a tree and harvesting a tree and replanting a tree. So as I was just saying, wood products are everywhere. We can really see the increase for timber and paper and pulp type products. This increase, is in use, and it's about better innovation in food packaging, but also consumer preferences not to use fossil fuel-based products. The other aspect of this sector is also the strong connection to our First Nations people. And, I was really excited when I saw these trophies at the Adelaide International. I think, why doesn't Australia really showcase our timbers and also our cultural heritage in being able to showcase to the world just, what Australia represents? And I think it's, for me, certainly as a tennis fan, this is the first time I saw a really strong Indigenous connection around something as simple as, trophies. So, it makes sense that we should be doing this a lot more. But I think also it speaks, the artist speaks to the fact that for wood carvings, they are as special to Indigenous people as, rock art and what have you. And I think it is a really good way of connecting, First Nations people's culture to students of today to understand exactly, how long Indigenous people have actually been engaging with the forest sector and also the products that come out of that sector. But they do say, the artist does say that, that without wood they would not have shelter, been able to hunt or been able to do most things. And I think in today's society that is exactly the same thing for, when we think about our houses and, no matter where you go, if you start to really look at wood and wood type products, they are everywhere and we use them every day in our everyday lives. So of course, in addition to cultural connections, there is a psychological connection that we all have with natural products. And I think we've got, there is the aspect of the biophilic impact, and biophilia is the love of life, and biophilic design has been shown to have many psychological benefits to human well-being. And this is an area of interest, of research interest in the field of psychology. So with a better understanding of, just how connected we are to sustainable forestry and to the forest sector, I think then I just wanted to pull out some key key themes, which I think cuts across generally the general curriculum. One is, and some of these are relatively new terms, the circular bioeconomy. We hear about it, better understanding that is going to be, where our economy is actually going to, I think cuts across a number of different curriculum areas. Sustainable forest management, a lot of people don't really understand what that means. It's certainly not deforestation. And nature-based solutions, which can be a bit confusing when you just hear it for the first time. So when we look at the circular bioeconomy, it is actually an economy powered by nature. It's a relatively new term, and it emphasises that renewable natural capital and focuses on minimising waste, replaces a wide range of non-renewable type products. And the forest sector has its own set of, bio-based economy where, it is a subsector of the bioeconomy, but essentially it's transforming our systems through natural-based fibres. So this is why I think it's really critical that people have a better understanding of sustainable forest management and why it's so important. It is a key pillar of the circular bioeconomy, and the cycle of planting, harvesting and replanting is really what will sustain the forest sector and also the forest carbon cycle into the future. Sustainable forestry also is more than just the carbon cycles. It is about the economic, social and environmental impacts, and all of our forests are certified, and also I guess it's not always the case in all jurisdictions that that the same practices are actually delivered across the globe, I guess. And as the bioeconomy increases, so will the demand on our sustainable forests, or I should just say on our forests. And I think that is where we could possibly, without having really strong jurisdictions enforcing, I guess, laws around sustainable natural forestry, I think you can possibly have unintended consequences of deforestation. So when we think about the natural-based solution, I mean, it is around protecting and sustainably managing those resources. It does have a focus on biodiversity and also protecting nature. And of course, for a sector that often, people just think about the harvesting of the trees, and there's that negativity of language around logging. There often is that missed second part of the conversation, which is that we do replant and we do manage these forests to actually sustain them into the future, so that these products can actually become a broader aspect of that bioeconomy, essentially. So when you look at, leading climate, leading climate researchers and also leading climate, bodies, the IPCC essentially in its fourth assessment report acknowledged that sustainable forestry is going to be a key aspect of mitigation when we're looking at dealing with the challenges of climate change. And I should say that climate science, as I'm sure everyone in this room knows, is not new. It's had a very long tail, but decision makers are now paying a lot more attention to the climate science. And that brings me back to the importance of decision makers and part of the work that we do at AFPA, which is we need those decision makers to understand the significant and interconnected roles that the circular bioeconomy, sustainable forest management and the nature-based solutions will play as the world transitions to a net zero economy. Of course, I'll just leave it at that. And finally, more than happy to connect further with everyone in the room. I've got my LinkedIn QR code there if you wanted to scan it. And happy to engage with people across the afternoon. Thank you.